The rain came down like punishment, hammering against the windows of Mapletown Diner until it sounded like the sky itself was breaking apart. Inside, under the flickering neon light, Sarah Miller wiped the same counter for the 100th time. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the storm inside her chest. The last paycheck was gone. The landlord had already called twice. Her brother Ethan's medical bills sat on the kitchen table, unopened, like tiny white threats. She looked at the clock, only 7:42 a.m., and already her heart felt old. The smell of burnt coffee clung to the air, the kind that told stories of people who had been stuck in the same place for too long. A truck driver snored in the corner booth. An elderly couple shared silence instead of words. And Sarah, well, she smiled, because smiling was cheaper than giving up. When she refilled the sugar jars, she caught her reflection in the chrome surface. The girl staring back looked tired, her mascara smudged, her eyes red, but there was still something there. A flicker, a tiny piece of faith that refused to die. Kindness is the only thing I can afford to give when life has taken everything else, she whispered to herself. Outside. Thunder rolled across the fields. Inside. She straightened her apron and forced her heartbeat into rhythm, somewhere between desperation and duty. Sarah decided that today she would keep believing, that maybe the universe hadn't forgotten people like her. She didn't know it yet. But that belief would soon be tested in ways that would change her life forever. The bell above the diner door let out a tired jingle, the kind that blended with the rain outside. It was still early, the sky a dull gray, and only a few regulars sat scattered across the booths. When Sarah Miller looked up, she saw him a stranger standing in the doorway, soaked from the storm. His beard was thick and uneven, the kind grown not out of style but out of survival. His coat looked like it had weathered a dozen winters, and his shoes carried the mud of a long road. He hesitated before stepping inside, scanning the diner as if asking permission to exist there. Sarah had seen that look before. He sat at a booth near the window, the cracked vinyl seats sighing under his weight. He reached for a menu, his fingers trembling slightly. She noticed the way his eyes darted from one price to another, lips tightening, then relaxing as if caught between hunger and pride. When he slid the menu aside and stared out the window, Sarah already knew he couldn't afford breakfast. Without a word. She filled a bowl with steaming vegetable soup, placed 2 slices of fresh bread beside it, and walked to his table. The man looked up as she set it down. His expression flickered between confusion and disbelief. "You didn't order this," he said quietly. Sarah smiled, the kind of smile that tried to hide its own sadness. "Don't worry, sir. It's already taken care of." For a long second, he just looked at her, studying her face like he was trying to figure out why someone would do such a thing. Then his shoulders loosened. He lifted the spoon, hands shaking, and took the first bite. The smell of broth filled the air, mingling with the sound of rain tapping against the windows. From behind the counter, Sarah watched him eat slowly, savoring every mouthful as if it were a memory instead of a meal. There was something noble and broken about him, something that didn't fit the picture of a simple drifter, but she didn't pry. People carried their own storms, and Sarah had enough of her own. Still, something about him made her pause. When she refilled the coffee pot, she caught herself glancing his way again. He was staring down at the table now, lost in thought. There was an exhaustion there, not just physical, but deep, quiet defeat. The kind of weariness that no sleep could cure. Sarah knew that feeling. She wiped her hands on her apron and decided not to let him sit in silence. She approached again, soft voice cutting through the low hum of the diner. "Would you like some coffee with that?" He looked up slowly, as though waking from a faraway place. "I can't pay," he murmured. "Then it's a good thing I didn't ask for money," she replied with a gentle grin. "Just say yes or no." His lips twitched into something that might have been a smile, though it disappeared almost as soon as it appeared. "Yes," he said finally. She poured him a cup, the steam curling between them like a fragile bridge. For a moment, the diner didn't feel so empty. As she walked away, the cook, an older man named Tom, called from the kitchen. "You giving out charity again? Sarah?" She rolled her eyes but didn't answer. She had heard it before. Every act of kindness in that place came with an opinion. But Sarah didn't do it for praise. She did it because she knew what it felt like to be invisible. From his booth, the stranger watched her move about the diner, helping a crying toddler, fetching a blanket for an old man sitting near the draft. She smiled at everyone, even when no one smiled back. Something stirred inside him, something old. When he finished his meal, he folded his napkin neatly and placed it beside the bowl. Sarah approached to clear the table, and he spoke before she could. "Thank you," he said simply, but his voice carried weight. "You didn't have to do that." She tilted her head, still smiling. "Maybe not. But sometimes doing the right thing doesn't need a reason." He nodded slowly, as if memorizing her words. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she said. "Sarah Miller." He extended a hand, rough and calloused. "Nice to meet you. Sarah, I'm Richard." She shook his hand without hesitation, not knowing that name would one day echo through her life like thunder. As he left, she noticed he didn't look back. He walked into the rain, shoulders squared, as if carrying a secret. Sarah watched him disappear into the mist, then turned back to her work, unaware that her small act of kindness had just set fate into motion. Later that day, Monica Grant, the diner's manager, would storm in, clipboard in hand, and the warmth that filled the room would turn cold. But for now, for this fleeting hour, the diner felt like a place where humanity still existed. And in the quiet corner of that small-town restaurant, a man who owned it all had just rediscovered what his money had made him forget. The rain had softened to a whisper by noon, but inside Mapletown Diner, the tension was thick enough to touch. The lunch rush came and went, leaving behind the smell of fries, old coffee, and human fatigue. Sarah Miller kept moving, her rhythm automatic: fill the cups, wipe the counters, smile even when her heart didn't want to. She balanced a tray with 3 plates when she noticed a young mother struggling to keep her toddler calm while pouring sugar into her coffee. Without hesitation, Sarah placed the tray down, crouched beside the child, and handed over a small packet of crackers. The little boy's tears stopped instantly. "You're a lifesaver," the mother whispered. Sarah just smiled and said, "We all need a hand sometimes." At another booth sat an old man named Mr. Carter, a widower who'd been coming there every Thursday since his wife passed. Sarah always made sure his table was by the window and his soup a little warmer than usual. She leaned in and said softly, "It's a bit colder today. Want me to bring you a blanket?" He chuckled through his loneliness. "You read minds now, Sarah?" She laughed, the kind of laugh that hid exhaustion behind warmth. Then the bell above the door rang again. This time it wasn't a customer. It was Monica Grant. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, each step like a warning shot. The chatter in the diner faded as she entered, clipboard in hand. Her mouth a tight line of disapproval. Monica was the kind of woman who measured people in mistakes and saw kindness as inefficiency. Sarah's smile faltered, but she straightened her apron and greeted her anyway. "Good afternoon, Monica." Monica didn't respond. She scanned the tables, her cold eyes calculating. When they stopped at the register, she froze. The transaction log was short one item: the bowl of soup, the one Sarah had given that morning. "What is this?" Monica's voice cut through the air. Sarah turned, her stomach sinking. "What do you mean?" Monica slammed her clipboard on the counter. "A missing meal, no record, no payment. You think I wouldn't notice?" Sarah's pulse spiked. "I gave it to a man who he looked hungry, and I said I'd pay for it." "You gave food away?" Monica interrupted, her voice rising with every word. Do you think this is a charity? Do you think this business runs on your pity? The entire diner went silent. A fork clattered onto a plate somewhere in the back. But no one moved. Sarah's face burned, her hands trembled as she tried to explain. It was just a bowl of soup. He hadn't eaten in days. I was going to... Monica took a step closer. You were going to what? Play hero with company property? You think your sob stories pay the bills? The cruelty in her tone sliced through the air. Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her eyes watered, not from guilt, but from humiliation. She tried again. Please, Monica, I'll pay for it myself. It was the right thing to do. The right thing. Monica's laugh was sharp and dry. The right thing is following rules. You're not here to save people, you're here to serve them. There's a difference. A heavy silence fell. The mother Sarah had helped earlier looked down, clutching her child. Mr. Carter stopped stirring his coffee. Everyone seemed to hold their breath. Sarah's voice cracked. I didn't mean to cause trouble, I just... Monica's words hit like a slap. You're fired. The word echoed through the diner like thunder. Get out of my diner. Sarah froze. For a moment, she thought she had misheard. Fired. Just like that. Over a bowl of soup. Monica, please. But Monica had already turned away, scribbling something on her clipboard. Her tone was final. You can collect your things, I'll process the paperwork, and don't think I'll give you a reference. The room was so still that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. She untied her apron slowly, her fingers shaking, and set it on the counter. The young mother whispered, I'm so sorry. But Sarah only smiled faintly and said, It's okay. Her voice was barely audible. Mr. Carter stood up, his frail voice trembling. She didn't steal anything. She was just being kind. Monica didn't even look at him. Sit down, Mr. Carter. This isn't your concern. Sarah looked around one last time. The same walls that had witnessed her laughter and long shifts now felt like strangers. The neon sign above the counter flickered, casting her in a pale, lonely light. As she walked toward the door, no one spoke. A few customers looked away, ashamed, while others stared, torn between guilt and fear. Even Tom, the cook, stood motionless behind the grill, his lips pressed tight. When Sarah reached the door, she paused. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass eyes red, mascara smeared, the smile gone. For a fleeting second, she thought about fighting back, shouting, defending herself. But she didn't, because kindness had always been her weapon, and now it had betrayed her. She pushed the door open and stepped into the gray drizzle. The bell rang behind her, a hollow echo of everything she was leaving behind. Inside. Monica straightened her clipboard with satisfaction. That's how you run a business, she muttered, but no one answered. The silence that followed wasn't ordinary. It was heavy. It was shameful. Even the rain outside seemed to hesitate, as if the world itself mourned what had just happened. And as Sarah walked down the sidewalk, head bowed, the puddles mirrored her reflection, kindness, punished by cruelty, yet still refusing to vanish. She didn't know that the man she had fed that morning, Richard Hale, was watching the whole thing unfold from across the street. And his silence wasn't indifference, it was fury. The street outside was a blur of rain and headlights when Sarah Miller stepped out of the diner for the last time. The bell above the door gave one final, hollow ring behind her, like a funeral bell for everything she had believed in. She clutched her apron to her chest, the fabric soaked and heavy, as if it carried the weight of her own shame. The rain was cold, almost punishing, but she didn't run. She walked slowly, each step splashing through puddles that mirrored her reflection, a woman stripped of purpose, drenched in defeat. By the time she reached her apartment, her clothes were plastered to her skin, her hair clinging to her face. The hallway smelled of damp wood and cigarettes. Room 2B, second floor, the one with the broken heater and the flickering light. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and was met with silence. The air was cold, stale, lifeless. On the table sat a pile of unopened envelopes, all marked with red stamps. Overdue, final notice. Next to them was a photo frame, the only bright thing in the room. It showed her and her little brother, Ethan, laughing at a county fair 3 summers ago. His smile was wide and fearless. Back then, he still believed she could fix everything. Sarah sank onto the couch, her legs too weak to stand. The springs groaned under her weight. She stared at the bills, then at Ethan's photo, her chest tightening with guilt. "How do I tell him?" she whispered. "That kindness cost me everything." The words echoed off the peeling walls. A drop of rain fell from her hair onto one of the envelopes, smearing the red ink. She laughed quietly, a sound halfway between disbelief and despair. "One bowl of soup," she muttered. "One stupid bowl of soup." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her hand against her mouth as if trying to hold back everything she had been keeping inside. The apartment was dim except for the weak light coming through the cracked window. It flickered across the walls like a dying heartbeat. Sarah stood up and wandered to the kitchen. The cupboards were nearly empty. A can of beans. Half a loaf of bread gone stale. She hadn't eaten since morning, but her stomach twisted in protest at the thought of food. She filled a glass of water, took a sip, and stared out the window. The city lights shimmered in the rain, blurring like tears. Somewhere out there, people were laughing, working, living. And she had done the right thing and still lost. A knock would have been better than the silence. At least then she'd have something to answer. Instead, the only sound was the steady ticking of the cheap clock above the fridge. Each tick felt like a reminder. Time was moving on, but she wasn't. She dropped back onto the couch, hugging a thin blanket around her shoulders. Her fingers brushed against the photo frame again. "I just wanted to help," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Is that so wrong?" Her throat tightened, and the tears she had been holding back finally broke free. They came quietly at first, then harder, shaking her shoulders. She pressed her face into the blanket, trying not to sob too loud. The walls were thin. The neighbors didn't need another reason to pity her. Outside, thunder rolled far away, low and distant. The storm was leaving town, but inside her, it was just beginning. Sarah's mind replayed the day again and again. Monica's voice, sharp as glass, the silence of the customers, the humiliation. She could still feel their eyes on her, the pity, the discomfort. They had watched kindness being punished and done nothing. She wanted to believe that good things happen to good people. But tonight, that belief felt like a cruel joke. Her phone buzzed once a message from Ethan. She picked it up with trembling hands. It was a photo of him smiling, holding up a drawing. "For my big sister, the strongest person I know." Her heart broke completely. She typed a reply, but no words seemed right. How do you tell someone who still believes in you that the world doesn't reward kindness? That doing the right thing sometimes hurts more than doing nothing at all? She deleted the message, turned the phone face down, and let it fall onto the couch. The light outside flickered again. She looked toward it, the last weak beam slipping through the window, landing across Ethan's photograph. For a moment, the smile in the picture seemed alive. Sarah took a shaky breath and whispered, "Maybe tomorrow will be different." But even she didn't believe it. The rain slowed. The silence deepened. The clock ticked past midnight. Sarah leaned back, her eyes heavy, her spirit drained. The sound of the storm faded into the hum of the refrigerator. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world went on, indifferent. And in that tiny apartment, a woman who had given all she had to goodness sat alone in the dark, questioning the one thing that had always defined her, her faith in kindness. But what she couldn't know was that across town, in a warm, well-lit office, Richard Hale was staring at a report with her name on it. His jaw was clenched, his expression unreadable. Tomorrow, he would return to the diner, and when he did, everything would change. The next morning arrived with sunlight cutting through the fading clouds. The storm had passed, but its echo still lingered in the air. Inside Mapletown Diner, the smell of fresh coffee and fried bacon mixed with a heavy, uneasy silence. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. Something was about to happen. At exactly 9 o'clock, the front door swung open. A man stepped in, his black suit pressed, his shoes polished enough to catch the light. His shoulders were squared, his gaze sharp. It took only a moment for the staff to recognize him. Whispered voices rippled through the diner. "It's him. That's Mr. Hale, the owner." Richard Hale had returned. Gone was the weary stranger from yesterday. In his place stood a man of authority, wealth, and quiet fury. The same hands that once shook while holding a spoon now rested confidently in his pockets. His presence filled the room, and every employee froze where they stood. Even the customers fell silent, sensing that they were witnessing something important. He walked slowly toward the counter, his gaze sweeping over the familiar walls, the same floor where kindness had been punished. He placed a folded coat on the stool, straightened his tie, and said in a calm, controlled voice, "Everyone, please gather around." The clinking of dishes stopped. The fry cook stepped away from the grill. The waitress wiping tables set her rag down. Within seconds, the entire staff stood before him. Monica Grant, clipboard in hand, was the first to speak. "Mr. Hale?" she said, smiling stiffly. "What a surprise. If I'd known you were coming, I'd have prepared a report." Richard's eyes cut to her, and the smile died on her lips. "Yes," he said evenly. "I imagine you would have." He looked around the room. "Yesterday morning, I came here as a customer. I was not wearing this suit. I didn't tell anyone who I was. I wanted to see how my business was being run when I wasn't watching." Monica straightened, trying to look composed. "Of course, sir. We pride ourselves on professionalism." He ignored her. His voice grew heavier. "When I arrived, I was tired, hungry. I must have looked like a man who didn't belong. Most people would have ignored me, but one person didn't." The room was completely still. Richard continued, his tone softening just enough for emotion to slip through. "A young woman brought me a bowl of soup before I even asked. She told me not to worry. She said it was already taken care of. That small act reminded me what this place was built on: kindness." He paused, letting the words sink in. Every eye turned toward the empty space near the counter where Sarah Miller used to stand. Richard's voice hardened again. But instead of being thanked, she was humiliated, fired, right here, in front of customers. Monica's throat tightened. "Sir, if I may, she violated company policy." He cut her off sharply. "Company policy?" His voice rose, echoing through the diner. "Our company exists because of people like her, not because of rules written on paper, not because of profits, but because of humanity." The air cracked with silence. The only sound was the faint buzz of the neon sign outside. Richard stepped closer to Monica. "Do you know what I saw that day? I saw a woman with more integrity than anyone in this room. She treated a stranger with respect, even when no one was watching. That's the kind of employee I want representing this diner." Monica's hands trembled, the clipboard shaking slightly. "Sir, please." He didn't let her finish. "Firing her was your biggest mistake." The words hit like thunder. Monica blinked, searching for something to say, but nothing came. The color drained from her face. "You've forgotten what matters," Richard said quietly. "You run this place like a machine. But this diner was never meant to be a machine. It was meant to be a home for people, for kindness, for community, for second chances. He turned to the rest of the staff. If any of you think kindness is weakness, you're in the wrong line of work. No one moved. Even the customers sitting nearby nodded slowly, some with tears in their eyes. Monica lowered her clipboard. Her voice was small now. "What are you saying, sir?" Richard looked directly at her. "I'm saying you're finished here. You're relieved of your duties, effective immediately." The clipboard slipped from her fingers and hit the counter with a loud crack. No one helped her pick it up. Monica's eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but found none. The same employees she had ordered around for years stared back in silence. Finally, she turned and walked out, her heels clicking a lonely rhythm against the floor. The door shut behind her with a soft chime that sounded almost like closure. Richard exhaled slowly, then looked back at the staff. Sarah Miller will be returning. She'll not only get her job back, she'll have a new position. From now on, she'll be floor manager. She's earned it. A gasp ran through the diner, followed by a wave of applause. Even the customers joined in. Someone started clapping first, then everyone followed. The sound filled the room, warm and alive, washing away the bitterness that had lingered there for too long. Richard smiled for the first time that morning. This diner isn't about money, it's about people. Remember that. He picked up his coat, nodded once, and walked toward the door. As he stepped outside into the sunlight, the staff watched in stunned silence. Inside, the light seemed a little brighter, the air a little lighter, and somewhere in that brightness, the spirit of kindness had found its way back home. The applause inside Mapletown Diner shook the air for the first time in years. The little restaurant that had seen too many tired faces and cold mornings was alive with warmth. People stood up from their seats, clapping until their palms stung. Some smiled, some cried. Even the cook, who rarely left the kitchen, wiped his eyes with a corner of his apron. Richard Hale raised his hand slightly, waiting for the noise to quiet. His voice was steady, filled with conviction. "Sarah Miller will return," he said, "not as a waitress, but as our new floor manager." The moment those words left his mouth, the room erupted again. It wasn't just applause, it was release, it was redemption. Outside, the sunlight broke through the clouds, streaming across the windows as if the universe itself wanted to witness this moment. For days, the diner had felt haunted by guilt and silence. Now, it felt like hope had walked in through the front door. 3 days later, that hope had a face again. The bell above the door jingled softly as Sarah Miller stepped back into the place that had once broken her heart. The same floor, the same smell of coffee and grease, the same neon lights humming faintly above, but everything felt different now. Conversations paused, heads turned. Then, one by one, every employee in the diner began to clap, not out of habit, but out of respect. Sarah froze for a second at the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She had prepared herself for polite smiles, awkward greetings, maybe even judgment, but not this. Not the sound of genuine gratitude echoing through the room she once left in tears. Richard stood near the counter, arms crossed, smiling proudly. He nodded for her to come in. "Welcome back, Sarah," he said. She managed a small, trembling smile. "Thank you, Mr. Hale. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "You already said everything that mattered when you chose kindness over rules." Her eyes glistened, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The applause faded, replaced by the quiet hum of life returning to normal. Yet nothing about this morning was ordinary. Richard gestured toward a shiny new name tag resting on the counter. It read, "Sarah Miller, Floor Manager." The engraved letters gleamed under the light. Sarah reached out, her hand shaking slightly, and pinned it to her uniform. It was more than a title. It was a promise that kindness still had a place in the world. The day moved slowly but beautifully. Customers who had witnessed her firing returned to eat again, eager to meet the woman whose story had spread through town. Some brought flowers, others left notes on napkins. You remind us that decency still exists. Even Mr. Carter, the widower she used to serve, shuffled in with his cane. Told you good things come to good people, he said with a grin. She laughed through her tears and hugged him gently. By afternoon, the diner was busier than it had been in months. Laughter filled the air. The smell of fresh soup and baked bread lingered like comfort itself, and in the middle of it all stood Sarah, no longer the fragile woman beaten by circumstance, but someone reborn. At one point, Richard approached her quietly while she organized receipts. "You know," he said, "I started this diner 20 years ago because I believed in community. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. You reminded me." She looked up, smiling. "I didn't remind you, sir. You just needed someone to show you that kindness still works." He chuckled. "Well, you certainly showed me. And if you ever doubt yourself again, remember this day." Sarah glanced around, the chatter, the laughter, the clinking of cups, and nodded. "I will." As the sun dipped low outside, the diner began to empty. The last few customers lingered over coffee, not wanting the warmth to end. Sarah stood by the door, watching them go, her heart full. It was hard to believe that only a few days ago she had stood in that same spot, drenched in rain, humiliated and broken. Oh, now she stood taller, her shoulders squared, her eyes brighter. When she stepped outside for a breath of evening air, the town looked different, cleaner, calmer, more alive. The streetlights flickered to life, casting a soft glow over the pavement. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp air fill her lungs. Behind her, she heard Richard's voice through the open door. "You did good today, Sarah." She turned, smiling. "No, Mr. Hale, we did good." He nodded once. "Then let's keep it that way." As she walked home that night, she passed the same street corner where she had cried 3 nights earlier. The puddles were gone now, replaced by shimmering reflections of light. It was almost poetic, how even the coldest storm eventually cleared. Ethan's message reassured Sarah, reminding her that kindness prevails, as she confidently embraced new beginnings under the stars. Word about Sarah Miller spread faster than anyone could have imagined. Within weeks, Mapletown Diner became more than just a roadside stop. It became a destination. People drove from miles away, not for the pancakes or the coffee, but for the woman behind the counter whose kindness had turned humiliation into triumph. Reporters came, cameras flashed, but Sarah never played the hero. When asked what had changed her life, she only said, "Nothing changed. I just refused to stop believing that people are still good." Regulars would tell her that the diner felt different now, lighter, warmer, more human. And maybe it was. Every bowl of soup served carried a little bit of her story, a quiet reminder that compassion never truly disappears. On evenings when the rush slowed and the lights dimmed, Sarah would look around the diner at the laughter, the chatter, the small acts of decency happening at every table, and she'd smile. Life was still hard. The bills still came. But something inside her had shifted forever. "Kindness may not pay the bills," she would whisper to herself, wiping down the counter, "but it always pays back in ways that matter." And somewhere beyond the neon glow of the diner, someone who heard her story smiled too, a stranger reminded that goodness still has power. A humble waitress loses everything for helping a stranger, only to discover he was the diner's owner testing her heart. Her kindness turns a humiliation into triumph, proving compassion never dies. Like, share, and subscribe to Echo of Kindness for more real stories that restore faith in humanity.